Welcome to today's video focusing on Chapter 9. Wow, what is Chapter 9 going to focus on? We continue working on the bankruptcy intake, but now we're going to be looking at issues with income and issue with expenses. All right, so get ready. Here comes the PowerPoints. All right, so let's continue here with the bankruptcy intake. Of course, income and expenses are also very important when it comes to bankruptcy. A lot of times clients just think, well, I owe a lot of money and I can't pay it back, so I qualify for bankruptcy, right? It's really not that simple. So let's look at some of the issues you're going to face when it comes to income. Of course, we have the famous, actually, better term is the infamous means test that came in 2005 with the Bankruptcy Abuse Prevention Consumer Protection Act, BACPA. Horrible acronym, but that's the best we can do. First criticism doesn't apply to businesses, it only applies to individuals. But again, remember, Congress's intent was to make filing for bankruptcy more difficult and push people towards Chapter 13. Now, this has been criticized, and it was criticized from day one. It just seemed so obvious. The means test is looking at the last 6 months, right? In my textbook, I talk about one client who made about $10,000 in 1 month, but that wasn't their normal income. Normally, what they made was, just based on commission. But when everybody got fired from their job and he was collecting all those commissions, guess what? It increased his income over the last 6 months. COVID's another example. I had clients that I saw the year before, 2019, September, October, November, December. I reached out to them and said, come back. Maybe you qualify for Chapter 7. Why? Because we are only looking at the last 6 months. So we're looking at the past. So if you didn't qualify in December of 2019 and then COVID rolls around in February, more or less, let's say, and then all of a sudden, 2 or 3 months after that, you're not working or you're working part time, your hours have been reduced, whatever happened. Well, 3 months of that change in income, actually 1 month is enough to change your income over the last 6 months. Then all of a sudden you qualify for bankruptcy. And my that one client with the commission-based job is a perfect example. All I had to do was delay it. I had to delay it by quite a lot. I actually think I had to do the entire 6 months, if I remember correctly. But sometimes it's just 1 month you only have to change. Now, if we only are stopped here at the last 6 months, but we don't. We also have to look at the month of filing. So whatever month you're in, you have to calculate that as well and compare that with Schedule J over here. We'll get over that in a second. But when it comes to Schedule I, it could be a little difficult. Let's pretend today is let's say today is the 2nd of December. We've got to figure out what the client is going to make this month. Is that possible? Most of the times, yeah, there's consistency, the same hours, so that's not too difficult. But understand the problem is right here. I'm in the month of December and I chose that month on purpose. In December, if you get paid weekly, you don't get paid 4 times that month. You're going to get paid 5 times. And if you get paid bi-weekly, you're now getting paid 3 times. Does that affect the means test? Potentially. Usually one paycheck isn't going to do much when it comes to the means test. I mean, again, my client, that was an exaggeration, so much money. But it will affect Schedule I, because Schedule I has to coincide with Schedule J. So make sure when you're speaking with clients, you also have a better idea of what their pay stubs when they get paid, and hopefully I remember this when it comes to going over the petition. But think about this: when you're filing in December, even if you file at the end of the month and you saw the 3 paychecks already, well, if normally the client had $1,000 in expenses and let's say $990, I'm sorry, this is income here, and $990 in expenses, leaving $10 left over a month. Well, that extra paycheck is not going to be $1,000 anymore, is it? Let's say it's 1,250. Let's just make up a number here. Well, having that extra money pushes the client all assigned to Chapter 13. Honestly, the best solution is just simply delay filing bankruptcy until January. A lot of times I had to do that where I tell the client, okay, but you're getting paid more this month, and that really messes up my numbers when it comes to the expenses. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to wait in January. When can you wait in January? Again, the whole thing is silly. I could just, if I had nothing else better to do at 12:01 on January 1st, I can actually file for bankruptcy, and guess what? Magically, we made Schedule I disappear when it comes to December because now we're in January, and so we're going to use the 2 paychecks instead of the 3. So even that is silly, but it's things you have to know to protect the client, to protect the lawyer, to protect yourself. Make sure these issues are reviewed so there's no problems. And here's another one: side hustles. Clients sometimes think, well, yeah, I work at the bank. I don't need to include the side hustle, do I? Yeah, you do. It's income. It's all forms of income. The funny part when it comes to all forms of income is when people argue in divorce cases. Well, that's a commission or that's a bonus that gets included. Why wouldn't it get included? The IRS is ignoring your bonus? Of course not. But people make mistakes on their favor, right? That's the norm. But when it comes to side hustles, I've had clients who I say, you're working at Uber, maybe it messed up here the last 6 months, or maybe it messed up here. It doesn't matter which one. Now, when it comes to Uber, we'll look at the expenses in the next slide. There's only 3 slides for this presentation, but when you look at Uber, the expenses will go up, right? You're driving around, more fuel, more transportation costs, and that is part of the questions asked on the bankruptcy petition. But now the issue is, is that job going to affect these numbers? And if it does, I've had to tell clients, listen, if you want to qualify, you need to get rid of Uber, and you can go back to it in a few months. But as long as this process is pending, I can't have my numbers off, by several $100s and now push you back to a Chapter 13 because you have disposable income. It would be silly. I wouldn't like any lawyer to do that. I know that they do, but that's not something I would do. I would just tell the client, why not just go a few months? You're not obligated to work for Uber. There's no requirement. It's not a contract or anything. You want to take off 6 months, take off 6 months. It's going to be cheaper for you to do that than to be stuck in a bankruptcy for the next 5 years only because of your side hustles. So side hustles will affect the means testing, and it will affect Schedule I. So make sure the client provides all pay stubs so that can always be reviewed. Okay. Now, finally, when it comes to this part, we have to look at expenses. And the biggest part of expenses with Schedule J is this simply right here. What actually I'm going to go over, let me break that. Let me do that one second. First, let me focus on this here for a second. If you have $2,000 in expenses, most people go online and they read, well, I have almost 2,000 in expenses versus my income of 2,000. So you know what? I qualify automatically for Chapter 7. Well, it's really not that easy because of this right here. They probably included, and will make up a number, $300 in credit card payments. You can't make your payments on your credit cards if you're filing for bankruptcy. That's clear throughout the bankruptcy petition. That's more than established law. It's one of the few questions a lawyer should ask if you're still using your credit cards. And if you are, what are you using it for? Because those credit card payments have to stop. And once they stop, obviously you can't use it anymore. But when you deduct, let's say the hypothetical here of credit card statements, well, now we have $310 left over. Well, guess where this client is going? They're going back to Chapter 13. They got too much money left over. And so when you're looking at expenses, make sure that the expenses do not include the credit card payments, because sometimes clients in the intake will put like miscellaneous expenses, and maybe you're not paying attention to it. And it says miscellaneous, whatever, let's say they even spell it out and they put the 300, but you're just going over very quickly and you say, oh, yeah, look, the expenses are almost even with the income, so there's no problem qualifying. But again, we cannot include that. You have to make sure that gets excluded. If not, we're back to chapter, especially these clients who have astronomical monthly payments. Under, me, for example, I have a very high credit. My credit cards are probably, good question. Probably about $2,500 a month, but I do it for millions of reasons, miles and rewards and all that, and it all gets paid at the end of the month. But you can see how easily that would affect it if I say, oh no, I have an extra $2,500 in expenses. If it's stuff like utility bills and all that, great. But if the client is paying utility bills and everything else and the credit cards, then your numbers are going to be off. Another way that sometimes the numbers are off, and let's say there's too much money left over, what non-dischargeable debts are there? Let's go over some quick ones. Student loans could be an example. And if it's not student loans, it could be taxes to the IRS. So all of a sudden you're paying $300 a month. Let's say the client is $500 over after we exclude the credit card payments, right? What are they paying in student loans? Well, $200 and $300 here, that's $500. There's your $500. So sometimes I have to tell clients, you know what? Go back, start making payment arrangements again with the IRS. Get rid of that pause that you had. Remember, we're not going to wipe this out with bankruptcy anyway. So go back to paying your student loans. Let's go through the bankruptcy so that we have these numbers and we increase your expenses. It's not artificial increase, right? Those are real legitimate expenses that they have, and they're going to have to pay it anyway. So might as well start paying it now just to make sure that Schedule I, remember Schedule I is income, so that's easy, and Schedule J that we're looking at now, it's the expenses, and then that way everything matches up and there's no issues. Okay. Finally, when you're looking at the expenses, make sure you look at the expenses. Sometimes clients get a little overboard what the expenses are. They might put $300 a month in entertainment, and it's like, that's too much. What are you playing golf 3 times a week? That's unacceptable. Sometimes they put clothing. They put $300, and you're like, you're spending $4,000 a year in clothing? That's forget bankruptcy at this point. Why is the number so high? Sometimes they just simply mess up. Sometimes they want to increase their numbers to make sure that it looks like they're in a bad situation and need to qualify. Sometimes they go the complete reverse. They'll put something like a $40 a month electric bill when you know the electric bill where you live should be about 150 to 200. So it's not just taking the client's word at everything. Make sure you review it. Any questions, you go back to the client, confirm. You're going to go over the trustee documents, look at the bank statements, what's being withdrawn from the utility company, and guide yourself by that. Don't always guide yourself by what your client says, because realistically, those numbers change, but the client still has to complete the intake. Okay. Any questions, as always, feel free to reach out to me, post them in the comment section below, and let's get ready to review Chapter 10.